Joining me now is Yaakov Katz, a senior columnist at the Jerusalem Post and a senior fellow at the Jewish People Policy Institute. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
So with the Ramadan deadline upon us, Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu is vowing to defy President Biden's red line and invade Rafah, with hostage talks at an impasse and more than 1 million Palestinians sheltering in Rafah. So not only could this trigger a rift between the US and Israel, but the international community fears a ground invasion will be catastrophic for hostages and civilians. So what's your response to all this?
I think that we have two processes that are moving at the same time, and each are connected one to the other. Israel would like to try to reach a deal that would secure the release of the majority of the hostages, or at least those that we know to still be alive, and is using the threat of an offensive inside Rafah in the southern Gaza Strip to try to motivate Hamas, as well as the Qataris, who are the patrons of Hamas, to push the terrorist leaders who are on the ground inside Gaza to agree to a deal. The Americans are also trying to avoid that offensive in the south of Gaza, which might have some legitimacy. We could talk about that, but wants to get Israel into that place where it can reach a deal. All sides had used Ramadan, which begins today, as the kind of deadline and the clock that was ticking down towards it. But no one has reached that deal yet. And the question really will come down to how much longer is Israel willing to hold back and wait with the impending offensive in Rafah for this possible deal that has yet to come.
Yeah, let's look at that, because negotiations for the ceasefire and hostage release remain stalled over Israel's demand that Hamas provide a list of which hostages are alive and which are dead, and confirm the ratio of hostages to Palestinian prisoners to be exchanged, while Hamas is demanding a permanent ceasefire, a complete withdrawal of Israeli troops, and for all displaced people to return to northern Gaza. So what is the next move with these negotiations, if that is the sticking point?
These negotiations are extremely complicated, Rosemary, as I think we all know after weeks and months now of actually watching how they go back and forth. We saw over the weekend the Israeli intelligence chief meeting in Jordan with the director of the CIA, William Burns. So these talks are ongoing, and President Biden continuously repeats that he hopes that a deal is possibly on the horizon. But I think that Israel has made some demands that make sense, right? Israel wants to know which of its people are alive, who are the hostages that it has the potential to return to Israel, because out of the 134 who have been held in Gaza for almost 160 days now, Israel does not yet know what their fate is. Hamas cynically holds on to these people and does not reveal what their status is, whether they're alive, they're dead, they're injured. Israel knows absolutely nothing. And Israel also doesn't want to commit to a complete cessation of the war. While it's willing to agree to about 6-7 week ceasefire, it's not committing that it won't go back in and continue to fight against Hamas. Because let's remember, a ceasefire would keep Hamas now in power, in control of Gaza, still in possession of weapons and capabilities that could allow it to carry out another October 7th style attack in the future.
And meantime, we are seeing more anti-Netanyahu protests in Israel. We saw some pictures there as you were speaking to us. And critics are suggesting he doesn't want the war to end because it keeps him in power and protects him from prosecution. What do you say to that?
Netanyahu has long been accused and been suspected of having maybe ulterior motives here. I don't think that that's what's really behind the war. Obviously not. This was the attack by Hamas against Israel and the massacre of over 1,200 people on a single day inside Israel. However, the continuation of the war, the way it's being managed, the failure to essentially outline what the day after this war will look like, or the refusal to do so by the Israeli government, does raise some question marks of why Netanyahu is refusing to do this. And we're now seeing that, Rosemary, play out with the fight and the growing tension between President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu, as Scott referred to before, the raising and increasing rhetoric between these two, about President Biden saying that Netanyahu is working actually against the interest of the people of Israel, Netanyahu snapping back at the president. Israel and the U.S. need to retain this alliance and continue to work together because of the nature of the threats that we all face in the Middle East and in this region. And I think that, unfortunately, we're seeing a bit of politics mud these waters on both sides right now.
And humanitarian aid is set to arrive in Gaza by sea. The US will then start work on the floating pier, which will receive future aid. But this will take time to build, of course. How much concern is there within Israel for the starving Palestinian civilians caught in the middle of Israel's war with Hamas and paying the ultimate price?
Yeah, there is a tragedy that is unfolding inside the Gaza Strip, and unfortunately, there are civilians who are paying the price, and they're being held hostage by a terrorist entity, Hamas, which continues to control Gaza, continues to attack Israel, and continues to hold on to Israeli hostages. I think, Rosemary, there's an easy solution here. If the Hamas government of Gaza truly cares for its people, it would release Israeli hostages immediately. It would stop attacking Israel. It would lay down its arms, and you would see a free flow of aid into Gaza like never before. But we have to understand that at a time of fighting and a time of war, any country, and Israel included, needs to be careful where that aid goes and who is in charge of it while it's trying at the same time to fight an enemy, but also try to care for the people of Gaza who are those uninvolved civilians. This is not an easy task for any country in the world to deal with.
Yaakov Katz joining us from Jerusalem. Many thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you.